It's being dyslexic doesn't mean you're stupid. And that's the message I really want to stick to everyone, because I think it's such an important thing to advocate and to say and to spread out there.
Right, and to recognize, I think that with our society, whether it's said or it's just thought and not said, and too often it's said behind closed doors. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Literacy Keys. So today, Alex and I want to talk about some perceptions about what dyslexia is and kind of get into the nitty-gritty. Some of the things that we're going to share may be a little harsh, shall we say, but they're based on real experiences that, Alex, you have had, things that have been said as recently as a few years ago. And I thought it was important not to sugarcoat it, because there are a lot of perceptions that are out there about what dyslexia is, about what being dyslexic means. And so let's just get started. So welcome, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, just jumping in, I think, talking about the huge elephant in the room, I feel like, now there's this connotation, it's the D word, what does dyslexia mean? And I just really think that, at least before, when I was in high school, 7 years ago, 6 years ago, there was definitely not enough research into dyslexia and what that meant, and how the brain processes information differently. But I think now things are starting to change, but I still don't think that they're at the level where they need to be.
Yes, and I think part of that is the research existed. The research has been around for 30 years, right? But it's been in its own, in like a different realm, whether neuropsychology, neuropsych, whatever. It didn't make it into education until more recently, I think, with the whole science of learning, and that there is a way for the brain to learn, to read, and so forth. And then, as with everything, as that begins to roll out, there's still a perception, a societal perception. And so the difference is the amount of time and how it permeates and how people change their mind or become more educated, shall we say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest message that I'm going to say right now, start from the beginning, is that being dyslexic does not mean you're stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's such a powerful message that I preach by. I mean, I've become my own advocate for that reason. And it really just shows, and I think I am someone who can prove this. I mean, I am a high achieving person. I graduated with a bachelor's of science in economics. I graduated with a master's of arts in brand management. So I've been very dedicated to my education, and it hasn't always been easy, but that it's true that really being dyslexic does not mean you're stupid. And whoever to say that is just really just not educated in dyslexia and what that means. And just really all it is that your brain processes information differently, and you just need to find a way to work with it.
Right. Work with your strengths and leverage your strengths. But when you set your mind to something, it's a matter of persevering. And I think that's really, really important. So why don't we go back several years? Because it seems like this is something that didn't just appear yesterday, these perceptions, but really are based on some experiences that you've had along the way. Now, you mentioned high school, so why don't we kind of journey back?
The journey back in our little time machine.
Right, exactly.
So basically, I really think that people's reaction to the word dyslexia is just so... I'm speechless to this. It's really something that's uneducated. And for me, this first time, after I got my diagnosis, you had a little bit of relief, or at least I had a little bit of relief understanding why sometimes things were a little bit harder for me. Was I sat down with my school psychologist, and we were talking about, okay, being dyslexic, what does that mean? And in this conversation, I was basically told that if I ever wanted to have help with anything, I would
Right.
have to drop out of any advanced courses that included AP, that included IB courses, which I was fully capable of taking.
All right, so let's step back a sec. When you said if you wanted any help, such as timing accommodations or anything, because one of the things that we noticed is that brain processing speed of dyslexics then may be slightly slower. Not everyone, each individual is unique, but in your instance, kind of the speed at which you process information was different than, let's say, the average person. All right.
Yeah.
So they said specifically, this was a school in high school, that any type of assistance, accommodations, or anything could only be achieved by dropping out.
Yeah, and honestly, saying that, which is so powerful to someone who's really trying their best and really, wanting to achieve this advanced education and really valuing this, I'm beyond of a loss of words, because it's something that like really does affect you and what you think and your perception on, does that mean I'm stupid because I'm dyslexic? And you really start having this moment where you start questioning yourself. You're like, well, I'm dyslexic, so that means I am stupid. But
Right.
I think it was just this whole wrong approach, where instead of honestly trying to come up with other ways that maybe someone could have helped me with my spelling, or someone could have helped me or learning how to use audiobooks, or like what technologies existed, instead of me having to then say, absolutely not, I'm refusing to drop out, I will find my own way.
So let's step back a sec, because if I remember correctly, in high school, and this might be pre-diagnosis, you also had, and I'm going to call it a chip on your shoulder, in the sense of you didn't want to show how much time it would take you to actually accomplish your homework and things like that. So why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that can be helpful to people that are listening to it, that you yourself,
Yeah,
did.
absolutely. So I definitely will say, so a lovely thing about my school was that being smart and wanting to achieve was actually considered kind of cool. I mean, all the jocks were higher achieving students. And you would really want to push yourself to really do that. But at that level in middle school, things, while you were sort of working hard for it, were still coming more naturally and easily to certain students. And so, because of that, I had in my mind that I would never show anyone that I was struggling. If it took me 5 hours to write a paragraph, it took me 5 hours to write a paragraph. I mean, that would be, I would say goodnight to everyone, and then I'd go into my room and I would just start working. And so I would refuse to show to anyone how hard I was committed to making things work for me. And I think that was like something really, really big throughout my journey, is that I never learned how to ask for help when I needed it.
Fair. Okay. So in the beginning, especially in high school, then there absolutely was no sense of being able to advocate for yourself.
No, I mean, I think a big thing is that when you don't know how to advocate for yourself, when you don't know what's the underlying issue, it's really hard to then, go out to the world and say, I'm advocating for myself, when I don't even know what to advocate for.
Fair.
So I think that's really just was one thing that stuck to me. But also, I mean, going back a little bit to people's conversations, I remember one conversation that I had with my friend about like the word dyslexia, and we were in a group setting, and when I said, we were talking about dyslexics and blah, 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 and I said, oh yeah, like I can definitely relate to that. I am dyslexic. I mean, the room just got cold. They're like, but you're smart, Alex. So you're clearly not dyslexic. And this was not, the first time that something like this had happened. Do you remember what happened with AP, that story, or what happened in class?
Well,
can I share that?
Absolutely.
Okay. This one really stuck with me. This was a really powerful moment, but we were in history class, AP history, and we were all like a little bit like quip with each other. We would make comments quickly, but that was just like the vibe of the room. And I remember one time someone actually said to me, Alex, so what are you going to do for the exam? Are you going to go into the retard room? And I just remember being shocked and hurt and not even knowing how to respond to. I mean, for God's sakes, this was like 6 years ago, 2019. The connotation of the word was a little bit different, but it still had that negative connotation, and it should not have been used in that way. And I just remember just being shocked and speechless. And I'm not usually a person who remains speechless for long, but I had no clue how to respond to that, because I was like, really? We're here. We're in the same class. We're doing the same workload. Like, we're achieving the same thing. And because I have a learning disability, you think that. And I was just so shocked and stunned. That's all I could remember. I was just stunned that there was this lack of education around the word, that he actually said the R word with just like, and I was just shunned, really
Right.
just like shocked.
All right, so let's step back and let's try to unpack it, all right? Because on multiple levels, there's so much there on multiple levels, right? So I think that on one level, the fact that someone said or implied that maybe you wouldn't be able to achieve something, I think is probably one thing. It was 6 years ago, so really in the overall frame or time scheme, that's really not that long ago. And it really highlights the fact that the average person really doesn't understand what dyslexia is, what is implied, and what it means. It also seems to suggest that any type of accommodations perhaps provide an unfair advantage. It just like on so many levels. So which of the three, if not the other ones, do you want to tackle?
Honestly, I think definitely accommodations as a leg up. That was something that really bothered me, because everyone really had this idea behind it. I think it's definitely something that needs to be talked about.
All right, now let's step back a sec, because you took an AP exam without any accommodations. Do you remember it? Because I remember that.
Oh, I definitely remember that one. I just remember it being one of the most horrific exams that I've ever taken, not because I didn't know the material, not because I didn't know anything, but truly because I could not finish anything. And at the end of the day, when you're missing 30-40% of your exam, well, what can you do? Just really, what can you do?
Right, for that. And so it kind of talks about on multiple levels that timed exams where that account for, let's say, 100% of your knowledge may not be the optimal way to demonstrate your knowledge. So there are inherent issues, shall we say, with taking an exam, a 3-4 hour exam, because number one, the amount of time and kind of the brain power required. So everyone that is taking a long exam like that is going to show a decline in performance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. What happens, though, in many dyslexic instances is the decline is steeper and faster. So that becomes an issue there for that. And do you remember you sent an email to the it's like one of the school administrators or something?
I remember.
I can talk about that if you don't want to.
Maybe you're best to talk about it. I just remember being so upset
Right.
and not even knowing how to deal with my emotions properly.
Right. And I remember that you came home and you were really, really upset and took it out on your mother.
Oh,
Right.
what?
Okay. And so my response is you need to talk to the school. You need to send an email to the individual coordinating the AP exams. You need to express all the things that you are sharing to me verbally right here, right now. You need to put them in writing and talk to the school
Yeah.
because it has to come from you.
Yeah, I remember it a little bit more now what I said on the email. But I
Go
also
ahead and
think,
share it because I
no,
think,
but I think going back to it, this also showed that I definitely had a problem with asking for help and showing the
yeah,
struggle because I didn't necessarily want to. And I think that was the beginning of my journey and process for advocating for myself. And I think the reactions I got to that email were more powerful. People were starting to actually be, I mean, it felt like we were on sides, like with the school, that some teachers were, 100% agreed with the diagnosis. They were like, that makes so much sense actually with Alex now, like really looking back at the red flags. And then other teachers being like, who didn't even have me as a student, being like, no, she's just lazy, or, she's just not working as hard, as other people in her family, or, I don't know, something's weird about this, blah, blah, blah. And it was really just like fascinating. And it was very much like, people were picking sides who weren't even part of the discussion, and that this was an actual topic.
I remember one teacher, you had shared with me that one teacher said, "Oh, I keep forgetting, that you're just so normal."
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's just like speechless. Like what, as a 16-year-old girl, what do you even say to that? What do you even say to your teacher? Oh, cool, thanks. Like really, what do you? And it's so funny because like now reflecting on it, I think there would be like 100 different ways I could have responded to it. Now really learning how to advocate for myself, but in the moment, you're fresh. You're like, okay, and there comes like that awkward like, haha, hee hee, and I don't know.
Right. And I think that one of the things that's so important is the understanding that dyslexia, it is tied to a weakness in phonological awareness, right, and sound manipulation. But the way that it presents itself is so different in so many students. And I think that that's where part of the difficulty is, because there is no one size fits all. There are a lot of commonalities, but most people are not aware of what these commonalities are. And if I can kind of make the comparison, people are much more aware of autism now, and it has taken decades to get to where we are now. And I see the journey of dyslexia showing certain parallels because people start to talk about it now, whereas we never did before. People are beginning to understand and to see some of the ways that it manifests itself. And most importantly, individuals, dyslexics, are beginning to advocate for themselves. So why don't we fast forward a little bit and talk about college, all right? And kind
Okay.
of the change that happened there.
Right. So college for me was a completely different story. When it came to advocating for myself, I mean, after I just spent 2 years really fighting with my school, and I was ready to get into the ring with my college, and I was really ready to advocate and fight and blah blah blah, just to get your rights. Just because again you're a high achieving student doesn't mean you're stupid, and really just like trying to inform that to everyone and really advocating. And it was so funny because I was really ready for this fight, and I contacted my school before, and I said, okay, so like if this is sort of like my diagnosis, this is, the report, what other information do you need from me? And then they send me a list back of like all the information, all the paperwork that they needed, filled it out. My mom, luckily, she's a type A personality, binder ready. So super easy to get all of that done. Everything's super organized. And I just sent it back to them and I was like, do you need to meet in person? Like, what are your like steps? Like, blah, blah, blah. And they were just like, no, I mean, based off of this, you qualify for XYZ. That doesn't mean you need to necessarily take everything. You can pick and choose what you think works best for the courses. We'll make sure that you also have audio versions for your textbooks. Unless it was like a very specific textbook that was like written by a teacher that year, which was a little bit harder. They were really, really good. And they said, no, this is according to the law. Like, this is there is no yes, no, I don't think so. It's just like, you have a diagnosis, you have like records and you have, teachers' comments and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, there is no, it was just very much black and white. Yes, you qualify.
Right.
And that was something that I really, really appreciated.
And let's talk a little bit about the amount of timing accommodations, because I think there's a perception of it being unfair. Right?
Yeah.
So let's talk specifically about how much extra time with your profile did you receive?
Right. So with me, what I received is, in college, I received 30% extra timing. Mm-hmm. And I thought that for me, it was very fair. I used every single second of that 30%. I mean, I'm not going to lie, but I felt really good that I was able to finally finish an exam.
And demonstrate your knowledge. And that's really what it came.
Demonstrate my knowledge.
And that's kind of what it came down to, is the processing speed, then providing enough time to do it.
And then, learning to advocate again is, don't get me wrong, we were in the year of COVID. We went on to Zoom University. We had our exams online, and that was a whole new ecosystem for everyone, not just for myself, but, for our professors, for the school. And so there were times where I'd be in the middle of the exam and I was thinking I have 30% extra timing, and all of a sudden the screen just like shuts off saying like, thank you for finishing the exam 30, minutes early. And I would immediately be like, what just happened? And having to, call immediately, the student help desk, saying like, what just happened? Emailing professors, to find a solution so that I could actually finish the exam. But I think once you learn to advocate for yourself, it really just changes the game. It makes your life so much easier. And it also, I really think that a lot of the time people are just naive and unaware of what it means to be dyslexic. So they don't know. And so if they don't know, how are they expected to react and to help you and like what you actually need, especially if we're not telling them what we need?
And I think that that's where it becomes really important. It's not just advocating for yourself, but it's doing it in such a way that explains to others, increases awareness, highlights some of the issues, but at the same time is, I can do this. Let me do it. Let me demonstrate to you all the knowledge, right?
Yeah. And going on to that, don't get me wrong. Part of the journey is also failing, and, something doesn't work out for you. In college, we can talk about failing, because I was also that person who studied my butt off. Mm-hmm. I never failed before, not truly failed. And so I never knew that sensation of failing. Don't get me wrong. I would come back with a C in high school and be like, how the heck did this happen? But it was nothing crazy. And I remember statistics.
In college. Statistics in college. Which was a requirement in order to graduate. Yes. All right, so let's help put it in perspective.
Exactly. So there was absolutely no way that I could graduate without having my requirement in statistics.
Without passing your requirement in statistics.
Yes, passing. Ooh. And I just remember I took statistics 5 times before I passed.
The exam.
Now, passed the exam, yeah. And I remember I didn't just pass with a C. I passed with a B-.
Congratulations.
So I felt very proud. No, but because I did my bachelor's in Italy. And so in Italy, the system works a little bit differently, that you sit in a class one time, and you sit in it once a semester. And then at the end of the semester, you have your finals, which is very similar to the US system. But the only thing that differentiates is that if you don't pass, then you have to retake it, but you're not allowed to retake the class. So you just have to retake the exam. And so then they just give you the textbook. They say the syllabus is the same. Have fun. And 5 times, but I'm so happy I persevered through it because it was a requirement and I really wanted to do it. And at the end of the day, I did it. So that's all that matters. Failing is a part of the journey.
All right. But I would like to pull apart some of the failing, because one of the things that they say is repeating and doing the same actions over and over again is the definition of, and we won't, right. So let's talk about, okay, so the first time you got the results back of your exam, you kind of knew that you hadn't passed, right? Because it was just a horrible exam, and it is what it is, right? So then what did you do differently that took 5 times? Because that's part of the journey, right?
Definitely. So each time I studied for it differently. And, by the 3rd time, I got myself a tutor. And I took it, realized that the tutor did not help me one bit. So I got myself a different tutor who really understood how to teach it to me and understood the problems.
And what did they do? Try to be specific, because that is going to help people.
See, I think I probably blocked more of this out immediately when I passed, so I wouldn't have to deal with it anymore. It was immediately like, gone, wow, passed, hallelujah, I'm graduating. But I actually think something really interesting, we would always meet. I mean, he was a friend of mine from class, so we would go either to campus, to the library, or we'd go back because he lived right next to campus with his roommates, and they were super, super sweet. And they were also a bunch of girls in my class. And the first thing we would do is we would just decompress, have a little drink of water, snacks, just talk a little bit before jumping in. And then he broke down the chapters really, really well, if that makes sense. And then he also really broke down the specific word problems, because we were giving problems that were paragraph long, that we had to really just understand what they were asking, pull out the data, write the formulas and stuff like that. And he was like, if you see this word, it's this formula. He was breaking down the cheat sheet. There was this code, this unspoken code that no one was taught during the class that he had just figured out. And he was like, I think you would benefit from this code per se.
So one of the things then I'm hearing is that actually statistics was not simply about the mathematical concepts and formulas. It really was a lesson in word problems. And so there was the reading, pretty complex reading behind it. And had you been tested simply on the mathematical concepts, you probably would have passed a long time ago.
Absolutely. That is something that I will absolutely agree. I mean, again, going back to my major was economics and management. So all of the courses that were necessary to take for the major were around economics. So our statistics was statistics of, financial institutions, statistics of economics, statistics of all these different topics and chapters within the statistical world, I'll say. And so a lot of the time we were given a paragraph, and it was like, find out the probability of this happening.
For that. And so by breaking it down into the pieces, right, identifying what the key words and the formulas that corresponded to that, right, and then applying it. And it sounded like because you were in a group setting, that you were also able to then kind of teach each other. And one of the best ways to learn a material is, or to test your knowledge of a material, if you can teach it, then you know it.
Yeah, absolutely. I would 100% agree.
Well, one of the things that I think the lesson there is the perseverance, and trying different things until you finally get it. And it can be incredibly frustrating and so forth. And sometimes we'll give up. And that's where we just have to stop ourselves. And maybe we have to give ourselves a rest for a period of time, and then go back at it with a different approach. Sometimes you have to take some distance in order to be able to approach it. And also using the expertise of others and not being afraid to reach out and say, you know what, the way I'm approaching it isn't working, and I need another way of viewing it, and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are the things that you would like to leave the listeners with? Like what do you feel is very important?
I think it's the message that I said at the beginning, really, that I hope it sticks to everyone. I mean, if you're a parent, if you are a student yourself, you're a worker and you really anything, it's being dyslexic doesn't mean you're stupid. And that's the message I really want to stick to everyone, because I think it's such an important thing to advocate and to say and to spread out there.
Right, and to recognize, I think that with our society, whether it's said or it's just thought and not said, and too often it's said behind closed doors. And I think part of the reason that we wanted to have this episode was really to air the dirty laundry, to air some of the things that people have said to you along the way, some of the perceptions that you've had to deal with along the way, some of the perceptions or some of the issues that you yourself have struggled with, and just in like, I can handle this myself, or I can't show any weakness, and so forth. Because really, it's by sharing all of the information that we can begin to change perceptions. If you never talk about it, we'll never change perceptions. But if you say, no, well, this is what happened to me. Everyone has different experiences, and just by sharing some of the experience that you have, then I think it really helps us make increase awareness for what dyslexia is, increase understanding of what dyslexics undergo or can experience, really. And the goal is to make the world a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a good message and a high note to leave it on.
There we go. So with that, I will say thank you to all the listeners, and until our next episode. Bye now.
Bye-bye.